Whether you're coming to Athens for a day before you hit a Greek island, or you're coming to Athens for a week to discover all the things there is to explore, here are all the things that you need to know before you land. Let's start at the airport. How are you going to get from the airport to the city center? You have a couple of options. You can take the metro, you can take the bus, and you can take a taxi. The metro will take you to Syntagma Square. It is the most central metro station, so if you then need to get on another line, or if your hotel is near there, you should be able to walk. There's also a taxi stand there if you need to then get into town and go to your hotel. Now you may be able to look at the map and say, oh no, my hotel is closer to another stop, and then you can get off there. A couple of things that you need to know about the Athens Metro. From the airport, it takes about 40 minutes, give or take, depending on what stop you're stopping at. If you're going past Syntagma, it will take a little bit longer. And then the other most important thing that you need to know is that from the airport, it stops running around 11:30 at night. So if your flight gets in at 10 or later, there's a small chance that you might miss that last train, so you might want to end up taking the bus. The other thing is, if you are not going to the center of Athens and you're going to Piraeus to, say, get on the ferry, the Athens Metro just had an extension, and you can now take the metro all the way from the airport to Piraeus Port. I haven't done it yet, so I'm not 100% sure how long it takes, but I imagine it probably takes about an hour. So just something for you to keep in mind. So let's say you decide to take the bus instead. It's a little bit different, so you're gonna walk out of the building and you're going to immediately turn right, and you're gonna walk down. You will probably see, I think it's a little white building, and you might see some buses lined up there, and that's where you want to go. In that little white kiosk building is usually a person selling tickets almost all times of the day, and the bus does run 24 hours. It does get a little bit less overnight, so they may only come every hour, so another thing to keep in mind. You can either buy your ticket from the person in the kiosk, or they have the ticket machines that you can buy electronically there. The ticket is €5.50 right now. What I like about the bus is it's a little bit easier. If you have a big bag, you can just get on with it rather than having to get into the metro. Not that the metro doesn't have escalators and things, I just find the bus a little bit easier. The bus will take about an hour, hour and a half, depending on traffic. If there's no traffic, it might even take less. It also takes you to Syntagma Square. The nice thing is the taxi stand is right next to it. So you can either get in a taxi, get on the metro, or walk to your hotel from there. The one other thing that I sometimes find is that if a lot of flights have landed at the same time, the bus can get crowded. The bus that you want to take from the airport to the center is the X95 bus. If, again, you're not going to the center of Athens and you want to take the bus to the port, you take the X96 bus. Your third option is a taxi. There is a taxi stand at the airport, and if you have a lot of bags or you want to just be dropped straight at your hotel, this is the best option for you. However, I recommend that you pre-book a taxi. I like to use a company called Welcome Pickups. I have a link down in the description box to them. They come into the airport and have a little sign with your name on it, and they will pick you up and take you straight out to the taxi. You then don't have to stand in the line, and they know exactly where you're going because you've pre-booked everything in advance, and it's really not that much more than the fare. The regular fare from the airport during the day to the center of Athens is around 40 euros. It is a set fare. It does sometimes change, so I'm saying 40 because it may go up sometimes, and then sometimes we get lucky and it goes down. At night, it's 55 euros. The other good thing about Welcome Pickups is they guarantee that your driver speaks English. So if you're nervous about that, it's another reason to book the taxi. All of this leads me to my next tip, which is to not rent a car if you're just staying in Athens. Parking in Athens is extremely difficult. A lot of people run around trying to find parking spots when they live here, and so to do that while you're here on your vacation is going to be difficult. particularly if you're not staying in a hotel with parking, and there are not a lot of those options. The other thing is you can walk most everywhere in Athens, all the tourist spots that you're going to want to see. So it's really not necessary. So if you are going to go somewhere else after Athens, my recommendation is to rent a car when you leave. Either rent it from one of the places in the city or go back to the airport and pick it up there. The nice thing about going back to the airport to pick up your rental car is you're out of the city and then you can just get on the highway. You don't have to come back into the crazy traffic of Athens. Let's talk about where you're going to sleep in Athens. Now, you probably already figured this out before you got here, but I'm going to give you a few of my tips in case you're still trying to make this decision. If it's your first time to Athens, I recommend that you stay in the Plaka neighborhood. Everything is walkable from there, and there are lots of restaurants to go to, so you're not gonna have to wander around the city going, where should we eat? I don't know, I have no idea. It'll be very obvious. You can walk to the Acropolis, you can walk to the Acropolis Museum, and it's very close to Syntagma, Monastiraki. All of the main places are probably anywhere from a 5-minute to a 15-minute walk away. If you've come to Athens before and you think, well, Plaka is great, but I don't really want to be in the thick of all the tourists, I'd like to stay in a different area. Where should I stay? You have a lot of options. Now, if you still want to be in the tourist areas because you enjoy that vibe, you enjoy the liveliness, and you don't mind the crowds and some noise, then you can stay near Monastiraki or Siri. Those are good options. Syntagma, all of those are great options. Still within, well, you're in the heart of it there. You don't hardly have to walk anywhere. Those are great options. If you want a more Athenian feel, but still be walkable, there are two neighborhoods that I recommend. One is Kolonaki and the other is Kukaki. They're both within walking distance of a lot of the sites. Now, a little bit further walk, so if you're not mobile, these are not great options. Kolonaki in particular, because it is up on a hill. Kolonaki tends to be a little bit more expensive as well, so just keep that in mind. Kukaki is great because it's where a lot of young people in Athens hang out, but it's not allowed because it's mostly just restaurants, and most of the apartments here are very like people who actually live here, so the hotels are surrounded by apartments, so it's pretty quiet. Most people come to Athens to go to a lot of the archaeological sites here in Athens, obviously the Acropolis and the Parthenon being one of them. What a lot of people don't realize is that when you buy your Acropolis ticket, you have the option to buy what they call a multi-day ticket. And this gets you into, I believe it's 7 sites in Athens over 5 days, and it's only 10 euros more than the Acropolis ticket. So the Acropolis ticket is 20 euros and the multi-day ticket is 30 euros. So it's actually a pretty decent savings, because I believe that if you just go to 2 other sites, then you've more than covered the 30 euros and you have several days to use it. So you don't have to come and hit like 4 archaeological sites in one day. You would be exhausted. But it's a great option if you're coming for more than one day and you want to see maybe 3 or more archaeological sites. They do sell this when you go to buy your ticket in person if you want to. You can also buy your tickets online. I will put a link to that below. It is going to ask you what time, but don't worry about the time. It's just the day that you want the ticket to start that you need to worry about. They're not gonna say, oh, you're here at noon and your ticket isn't till 1. They're still gonna let you in. That's not a problem. The nice thing is about the online ticket, if you're coming in the summer, then you may get to avoid the line to buy your ticket. You may still have to wait in line a little bit to even get in, because in the summer, particularly the Acropolis, the sites are really full. Now let's talk about some of the things that will help you understand Greece a little bit more so that you enjoy your trip. The big thing is that Greece is sort of on its own time. Things sort of run very slowly here. This is particularly true when you're eating out. Dishes just sort of appear in random order. They don't really all come out at once. It may take them a while to come and take your order after you've been given the menu, and it may take some time for you to get your check. And it's not because they're ignoring you. They're just not going to rush you. It's just not the way that things are done here. and things take a little bit longer to happen. So I would say that if you're in a rush to do something, you either need to slow down and do Greek life the Greek way, or you might need to do things with a little more planning. So if you know you need to be somewhere by like 6 o'clock in the evening, you need to make sure that like you've eaten and given yourself plenty of time for a few hours before that. I mentioned the weather, and it's probably a really important thing to know about. And yeah, you can look at the temperatures and things online, but sometimes it's not a very good accurate representation of what it actually feels like here. And that goes for everywhere. It's not just Greece. In the summer, it is extremely hot here. It may say in the Weather Channel that it's 90 degrees, but it feels even hotter. Particularly in Athens, because we just don't get the breeze that the islands do, and sometimes the humidity gets high, but you have to consider we're surrounded by concrete. There are some green spaces in Athens, but not a lot. So it tends to feel hotter than it really is, particularly if you're going up to the Acropolis, because there's no shade up there. There are like 2 trees at the top of the hill up there, and it usually feels like 5 to 10 degrees hotter up there than it does down on the street. In the off season, it tends to get cooler, like it's October now, and we had lots of days of sun, but it wasn't that warm. It wasn't cold, it was actually really nice. But then the last 2 days it's rained and it's been windy. And sometimes the storms come and we know about them, and sometimes they sort of appear out of nowhere. It also means that at night, once the sun goes down, it gets a little bit cooler. And so I recommend that, say October to the end of December, you bring layers. So that way, if it's warm during the day and cool at night, you're prepared. If you're coming in winter, so January, February, March, it's going to rain and it's going to be cold. Yes, it does get cold here. I think people think that Greece is warm all the time, and it's just not. Last year, it snowed for 5 days. It's also, as I said, our rainy season, and because Greece isn't really built for the winter, the buildings are not well insulated, and so it feels a little bit colder than it actually is sometimes, particularly with the damp and the lack of insulation. Another thing that I think is super important to talk about is sort of safety and scams in Athens. Now, I've talked about safety in Athens in another video, so I'm just going to briefly talk about it here, and I'll link to that other video down in the description box. One of the biggest things to know is that on the metro from the airport into the center, it is known that pickpockets will sort of target tourists. So my recommendation is to split up your valuables between bags, and then keep all of your bags within your sight at all times. So if you're going to carry a purse, ladies, you need to make sure that that purse is in front of you, it is zipped closed, and your hand is on it at all times. Men, do not keep your wallets in your back pocket. Please keep them in the front, in a jacket pocket, or in your front pocket with your hand on it. And be aware of your surroundings. Do not get involved in conversation with the person that you're with. Don't be looking up at the map saying, well, where are we? Because you should know the stop that you're getting off in advance, and you need to listen for that. Or look out the window so that you can see the names of the stations. The announcements are made in Greek and in English, and usually they're pretty audible. It's not like New York City where sometimes you don't know what they're saying. It's pretty audible, and there are signs in most of the trains, and then there are signs at every station to let you know what station you're stopping at. There are a couple of scams that you should also sort of be aware of in Athens. One is the phone stealing scam, which is where you've put your phone on the table, someone comes up with a piece of paper, it could be really small, it could be full-size paper, and usually they're fake trying to sell you something. They put the paper in front of your phone and they're telling you about the thing, and while they're telling you and distracting you, they've stolen your phone. Another thing is to make sure that if you do have a bag with you that is in front of you, probably between your legs and not hanging on the back of your chair, because it's unlikely that you're going to be paying attention to that, and a lot of the eating that we do here in Athens, even in the winter, is outside. The other thing is people will come and try to give you a rose or give you a flower, and they'll say that it's free. I haven't quite figured out what it is that they're trying to do. They may just be trying to guilt you into giving them money, but I just emphatically say no, and they are going to ask you multiple times. So just continue to say no and be very forward with them. Just say no. You don't need to say no thank you. You can put your hand up and just say no, because they're pretty aggressive. Sometimes there are people in Monastiraki Square who will put a bracelet on your wrist, and they say it's free, and then of course then they ask for payment. I do think that some of those free scams are them trying to distract you and someone else may be trying to pickpocket you at the same time. So like I said, it's best to just be very forceful and say no and actually move away from that person. Now obviously if they've come to your dinner table, you can't move away from them, but if you can physically move away from them, you should. If you're coming in the summer, it's hot and you need to make sure that you're drinking a lot of water while you're here, because the Mediterranean sun is super intense and you could get dehydrated really quickly. So water is available a lot of places. Most commonly, you're going to see these little kiosks on the street corners. They sell everything. They sell water, they sell beer, Coke, wine, candy, magazines, newspapers, all of those sorts of things. So the little bottles of water that we all know are supposed to be no more than 50 cents at those kiosks. It's a regulated thing. So I haven't had it happen to me in a really long time where I've gone and they've said, oh, it's €1 for this little bottle. But it's just something that you want to be aware of. Another thing I want to make you aware of is that while the metro is accessible, there are escalators, there are elevators everywhere, the streets, the sidewalks are not necessarily what I would call accessible. They're very narrow in some places, and there'll be a tree, there'll be a motorbike, there'll be a car parked on the sidewalk. They're not always flat. A lot of them are really old and they're broken and they're cracked, or tree limbs have knocked them up like this. So if you have walking issues, it's a problem. If you're in a wheelchair, it's even a bigger problem. The other thing I will mention is that the sidewalks in sort of this really historic center, so Sigtagma, Monastiraki, all of those places, a lot of the sidewalks are made of marble. So if you're here and it's raining, it's very, very slippery, so you need to be careful. I have even fallen in Sigtagma on the little marble curb because it was slightly wet. And it's not the only time I've fallen here. So if you have mobility issues, if you're in a wheelchair, think about that when you come. Think about budgeting for more taxi options so that way you can stay safe and not get hurt on your holiday. The last thing, and I always leave this last when I'm talking about it, is that you cannot flush toilet paper in the toilets here in Greece. And this is mostly true in Athens as well. You might find that some of the larger, more luxurious hotel chains have fixed that problem in their building. But for the majority of Athens, you cannot flush the toilet paper. And you're thinking to yourself, okay, what do I do with it then? There's always going to be a small trash can next to the toilet. Usually it has a lid and it's lined, and so you just put it in there and that's it. And if you're staying in a hotel, don't worry. The housekeeping staff is used to this. We do it in our homes, we do it in hotels, and we do it in restaurants, so it's not a big deal, and they will come and take that every day. Now, I want to hear from those of you who have been to Athens. I want to know all the things that you think I should have mentioned, or maybe I haven't thought of, down in the comments below. I would love to hear everybody's tips for Athens. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, I hope you'll consider hitting that subscribe button. Now coming up on the screen is another video that will help you plan your trip to Greece. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.